Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me again today to learn about resumes and cover letters. So today I'm going to be covering some of the things that we should and should not be including on our resumes. I'm also going to talk about how to tailor your resume for certain jobs. And I'm also going to talk about applicant tracking systems, what they are, and how to tailor your resume so it makes it through the applicant tracking system. So to begin with, I always like to talk about what we should not include on our resume. So in Canada, we don't generally put a resume title. So we don't need to title a resume. Most people know by looking at it that it is in fact a resume. And we do use resumes here more than CV. So a CV or curriculum vitae is a much longer account of all the things that you've done. A resume should probably be around 2 to 3 pages. So we don't tend to include everything, we just include the relevant things. We don't tend to date our resumes either, and we definitely do not put social insurance number or date of birth or any other important personal information on our resumes, because somebody can use that to steal your identity. So when you do get a job, you might be asked by your employer, do you have a social insurance number? They might ask you for your personal information, but that's not something that we should be putting on a resume. We don't disclose our gender, our marital status. We don't talk about religion or ethnicity or country of birth. We don't talk about physical health. We don't usually give a physical description. And, unless we're applying for a specific job, we don't generally have to put school grades either, which most people are very excited about. And political information, we don't put that on our resume either. I always recommend having your references on a separate reference sheet. I just think it looks better, and you can kind of choose your references based on the job you're applying for as well. And we don't need to put a reason for leaving a job. So employers can ask you that, but you don't have to put it on your resume. And we generally don't put a photo on our resume either. Now, if you're applying to one of the, casting movie companies, they might ask for that. But generally, we don't put a photo on there. And some things that you should include, obviously, your contact information, your employment information, so your job title, the business name, the months and the years that you worked there, the city and the country, and then you can have a brief job description with some bullet points if you'd like to do that. We also do include our information about our education. However, you can tailor this. So if you have lots of education, you can choose just to put the relevant education on there. And then we have other important information like transferable skills, if we have certificates or awards, any accomplishments we've done, if we have a driver's license, and any volunteer internship experience, and anything else that you think would be relevant for the job. Because the purpose of a resume is to advertise your skills. So employers might not read your resume and read between the lines. We have to spell it out for them very easily what your skills and experiences are, and show them that you're the right person for the job. And I'm going to talk about how to do that the rest of this presentation. So this is what we call targeting your resume. And we do this for every job that we apply for, which seems like a lot of work, and it can be, but it's really important to do this. And the things that we do are we use keywords from the job ad, we choose the right format for our resume, and we also think about layout and design. And I'm going to go through and explain what all of these mean and give you some examples. So keywords, we have to look at the job description. And usually what I do is sometimes I'll print out the job description, or, I'll just look at it on my screen and I'll just kind of highlight some of the important skills, some of the important key things that they're looking for, and make sure that those words are on your resume. So if they're asking for job experience and you have that, make sure that you put it on there. Any licenses that you need, put it on there if you have them. Personal skills, soft skills, hard skills, education and training. Look for all of those keywords. And if you have it, make sure that it's in your resume, because an employer is not going to read between the lines. Like I said before, that means that they're not going to take a guess and say, oh, well, maybe because they have this education, that might mean that they have these skills. No, If it doesn't say it on your resume, they will assume that you do not have those skills. So it's important to put it on there if you have them. And it's important to put it near the top of your resume. I've seen a lot of people who have a highlight section or they have a skills section and it's all the way at the bottom on the second page. The employer might not read that far. They are going to start from top to bottom and they're going to start reading and they're going to say, does this person have the skills that we're looking for? And if they get to your work experience and they don't feel like you have any of the skills they're looking for, they might not keep reading. So it's really important to have that skills section up at the top and include any licenses, education that you might have. You can even put your years of experience in that section. This is like a little snapshot, a little picture of who you are as a candidate. And it's really important to get that section right and to make sure that it aligns with the job ad. So the words that are in the job ad are kind of the same words that you're using in your highlights for your skills section. I just wanted to touch a little bit on hard skills and soft skills. So hard skills are things that you might learn on the job or you might learn them in school. Sometimes you get a license or a certification from them, like, AutoCAD might be a hard skill. And soft skills are generally described as people skills. So you kind of develop them naturally, although you can be taught these skills as well. And both of these are really important. Employers look for hard skills because obviously you're going to need some of those skills to do the job. But especially in Canada, employers do also look for soft skills. So being able to work with people, being able to work as part of a team, being a team player. You might have seen that word in job ads a lot. And that is really important for employers, especially in Canada, that people can work together pleasantly and get along and not have too many conflicts. So these two things, these two types of skills are both really important to consider and to make sure that you're highlighting those on your resume. So a lot of clients will ask me, what format should I use? What section should I put where? Should I put my education first? Should I highlight my job experience? What should I do? And I think the first question that you need to ask yourself is, what about your experience is most important for this job? Is it your education? Is it your skills? Is it your training? Is it your work experience? What is it? Because knowing this is going to help you determine how to design your resume and what you're going to put where. So some people who have a lot of job experience in one field of work can use a chronological resume. And so this really just kind of highlights your job experience because, if you're applying to be a teacher, for example, and you've got 15 years of teaching experience, your experience is going to speak for itself. So an employer is going to look at that and say, wow, this person has a lot of experience for a lot of years. They're probably going to be very experienced at this. So that's where we can use more of a chronological resume. We still do have that personal profile, highlight, skills section, but really what we want to highlight is that experience that's on there. Okay, so this person has a lot of experience as a mine laborer. If they were applying for that job again, the employer might say, wow, they've done this job twice already. So they're going to be fairly experienced, okay? Contrast that to a skills or a hybrid resume. And obviously, this focuses more on your skills. So this is great for people who maybe don't have the education, the training, or the direct experience, but they have the skills and the knowledge required to do the job. And this is key. They still do have the skills. They might not just have the training, or they might not have formal work experience, but they might have a lot of experience fixing cars and engines. Maybe they just worked with a parent or a family member and gained those skills, but they've never actually been paid for it in the job. So this is where we might think, okay, well, I'm going to put a second skills section here that really highlights my administration and computer skills, because this person does actually have a lot of experience. They've been an admin assistant for a long time, but they don't actually have the education. So they've only got a grade 12 diploma. They don't have the college diploma in administration, but they can clearly do the job. So they've used more of a skills resume to highlight that for the employer. So when the employer is reading it, they'll say, well, This person doesn't necessarily have the education, but they have the experience and they have the skills, and that you need to be able to highlight that on a resume, especially if you're missing, education or work experience. You've got to be able to do that. Okay, and this individual as well doesn't have the education. They don't have any training in landscaping. They don't even have any work experience in landscaping. However, they do have some of these skills, and it could be that they worked with a family member, or maybe they did, they volunteered, or what we see is a lot of people just learn these skills on their own. So they can do those things. They have the skills and they feel that they can do the job, but they don't have the education or the work experience. So this is where a skills resume is very helpful, because the employer is going to get to this first and say, oh, wow, like they can do a lot of the things that I'm looking for already. So already they're going to be thinking, well, maybe this person would be a good fit for this job. So this is a really important factor to think about when you are writing your resume for a job. What is important about your education, your skills, and experience? That's going to tell you where you're going to be putting certain sections on your resume, so you can pique the employer's interest and get them to keep reading your resume. So a lot of my clients will ask me about gaps in employment history. And I think now, people generally are getting more contracts, so they might get a 1 or a 2 year contract for a job. So people are having periods of unemployment. And employers are okay with this, I think. If it's less than a year, a lot of employers are really comfortable with that. And you can just explain, I was job searching. But there's certain things that you can do to kind of minimize the gaps in your employment history. And one of the things you can do is volunteer. And you don't really even have to volunteer every day, even every week. You might just be able to associate yourself with a volunteer group and volunteer when you can. And that's something that you can put on your resume. And the people that you volunteered for might be a reference for you as well. So if you're new to Canada, that might be a really good way to get a reference that you can use when you're applying for jobs. A lot of other people as well will put education and training. So some of my clients will attend free English classes, for example. You can put that on your resume and you can say, I was in education trying to upgrade my skills. And, other clients will do freelance or consulting work. So, this could even just be helping people fix their computers, for example, friends and family fixing their computers. Maybe there's something else that you do. Some people will, make crafts and sell them, whatever it is. There's things that you can do to put on your resume to say that you were doing something. But if it's for a few months, I think employers are getting more comfortable with this idea, because people, who are entering the workforce, they're not getting these long-term jobs. They're getting little contracts to start with, and this is becoming fairly normal for gaps in employment history. Some things to consider as well when you're writing your resume. Obviously check for, grammar and spelling, layout and design, things like always using the same font throughout your resume makes it easier to read. Making sure that the font size is the same for similar sections. Like, pay attention to those little details, that the bullet points are the same size, that they actually all line up on the document. Those are things that people pick up on very, very quickly. So do proofread it. You might want to get someone to proofread it for you as well. Sometimes I do that for my clients, just to read it over, a second set of eyes to make sure that everything is as it should be. And just be aware too that it's not too lengthy. It's not too long. We want it to be easy to read. And when people are reading a resume, having bullet points with short statements is easier for people to read than one big paragraph. So be aware of that too, is that if you have, a paragraph under a job listed, for example, and you've got some really good job experience, it might get lost to the reader in that big paragraph. So if you can divide it up into shorter bullet points, people are more likely to read that, because it's easier on the eye, it's easier for the brain to retain that information than a big paragraph. So keep that in mind as well. Short and to the point on a resume is much better than, a 5 or 6 line paragraph where that really important information might actually get lost. So I did want to talk to you about layout and design because I do get questions about this a lot, especially from my more creative clients who might think, oh, I want to make a designed resume with some graphics on it. This is something that's going to be the answer to whether you should do this or not is going to be different for everyone. And I'll say this, that if you are a trained graphic designer and you get paid for your work, then you might be able to design yourself a very cool designed resume. But for most of us, and myself included, we don't have the skills to be able to do that. And it's very difficult if you don't have those skills to create something that looks nice and artsy and creative, but is also easy to read. And that's the key. So if you're handing these resumes out in person and you want to get someone who has these skills to do that, then great. As long as it's easy to read, it's not too confusing, and it's done by a professional, then you can use more of a designed resume. But if you are mostly applying for jobs online, so on Indeed or on company websites, you're going to want to make sure that you have a simpler resume. And I'm going to explain why in a minute. It's very important to think about how you're going to be getting this resume to the employer. So if you're handing it out in person, a nice designed resume might be a really eye-catching thing. It might get them to call you back. If you're applying online, though, you're going to want to consider a simpler resume. And there's a reason for that. The question that we ask is your resume going to be scanned by an applicant tracking system or an ATS? And it's a really important question to ask because applicant tracking systems are becoming more and more common in the job search world. And applicant tracking systems are software that scan and sort job applicants. That's exactly what they do. So your resume, when you send it online, when you apply online, it could be scanned by a piece of software, so a computer. So a person is not even looking at it to begin with. And it filters out candidates deemed to be unqualified. And I didn't say that it filters out people who are unqualified. It just filters out people who are deemed to be unqualified. So that means that if you submit a resume that the applicant tracking system cannot read, your resume might never get seen by a human being. And you might be the best candidate, but you're not making it through this system. So I'm going to give you some tips to consider when you are applying online, give you the best chance of your resume getting through this applicant tracking system. Because once it gets seen by a person, that's the first hurdle that you've overcome. But it's really important to consider all of these things. So keywords, obviously, we use keywords from the job ad. We use the job titles from the job ad if it's honest to do so. So obviously we're not going to lie, but if the employer says we're looking for someone who's an enthusiastic team player, and your resume says I'm able to work with members of the team, you can put I'm an enthusiastic team player. You can use those words that they use as long as it does reflect you. So the design, keep it simple. Use standard fonts like Arial, Times New Roman, Calibri are the top 3. Okay, don't use fonts that are difficult to read. Pick one font and stick with that one font. I cannot tell you how irritating it is when you're reading and there's all these different fonts. It makes it difficult for people to read. And use standard circle bullet points. Don't use fancy bullet points either. That could trip up the applicant tracking system and make it harder to read. And things to avoid are images, columns, charts, and graphics. Okay, so even columns, if you've got 2 columns, the applicant tracking system may not be able to read that so easily. So just stay away from them. Keep it very simple, 1-line bullet points. Avoid hyperlinks as well, because in my research, I found that some hyperlinks are not easily read. And headers and footers. So this is a really big one. A lot of my clients, when they do a resume, they will have their contact information, their name, their address, their phone number, and their email in a header. And these applicant tracking systems may not even read that. So they may get this wonderful information from you and say, wow, we really like this person. Who is it? Because sometimes these applicant tracking systems, they don't just scan your resume, they take all the information and they reorganize it. So it's an it's in a standard way for everyone. So when the recruiter's looking at it, they're going to see a report of, applicant A and their skills, and then their education, and then their work experience, applicant B, same information in the same order. So they might not see your resume as you've sent it. They're just going to get little bits of information that are important for them. And if they don't have your contact information associated with that, they might not take the time to go back and try and find out who you are. So that's a really important one to consider. Put your contact information in the main body. Don't use a header or a footer for any of that important information when you're applying online. It's a really important thing to think about. And I am going to talk just a little bit about cover letters because I do get a lot of clients asking about this as well. If you are new to Canada and you're not familiar with what a cover letter should be, it is a letter that you write to the employer, and there is a certain standard that we follow as well. And I can do another session just on cover letters, but basically it's designed to explain to the employer why you are the right candidate for the job. And this is a really good place where you can talk about your passions for the job, things that you can't really include on your resume that don't really fit on there. So this is where we are explaining to the employer, this is what I'm looking for. This is why I'm the right person for the job. Here's the skills and experience that I bring. Maybe you have personal experience. So these letters are different for everyone, but it's important to do some research about cover letters, because for any professional job that you apply to, you are going to need to include a cover letter. And this is something when I work with clients who are new to Canada, some of them are not familiar with this because in their country, they don't do this. We do this a lot. And it's a very important thing to remember too about cover letters is to find someone who can proofread it, because employers expect these cover letters to be perfect, to be free of mistakes, which if you are learning English or French as a second language, sometimes that can be very difficult. So if you can find someone who's willing to proofread these, that's a really good idea. But please make sure that when you're applying for a professional job that you're including your cover letter. And I always like to include the cover college diploma, you might need to have more of a full page cover letter. So it really depends on the job. So this example is something that I kind of made up for a job that I saw that I thought maybe I could apply for with my skills. And it's fairly short. It's just an example. If you were applying for a job, you might put some more information in the middle paragraph, but that's basically what we're looking for when we are applying, when we're writing a cover letter, that we have all of those things in there. So in here, I talk about my experience. This was for a job for breakthrough autism, working with children with autism. So I talk about my experience as a primary school teacher, working with children, helping them reach their goals. And I use some of the words from their job ad, like energetic, enthusiastic, and patient professional. Okay, so I've kind of ticked all those boxes there. Obviously, yours is going to be longer than this. This is just an example of what it should look like. And just some tips for cover letters. So we talk about keywords. I talk about keywords all the time for a reason. You target your cover letter for every job you apply for. Now you can use ones that you've used before, but you have to put the company name. If you know the person that you're sending your resume to, include their name. Dear Mr. Smith, dear Miss Blakely. Okay, if you know their name, make sure that you include that. And you want to capture the reader's attention. So you want it to be interesting to read as well. This is the time where we talk about passions and our beliefs, if it's appropriate for the job. So usually if you're working with people, even doing sales, things like that, or talking about, how this has always been a passion of yours, employers like to know that. They like to know if you are very interested in this position, if this is something that you need to do. And in that way, we're complementing our resume. So we're not just writing out all the things on our resume, we're kind of including things that are, a little bit more personal, to kind of go along with your resume. And what I like to do on cover letters as well is take the heading, so that on my resume, when I have my name and my contact information, however that heading looks, I like to put that on my cover letter too. So it looks like a branded document. It looks like they go together, like more of like a little brochure about yourself. That's just personally what I like to do. But I think it adds a touch of professionalism as well. So the last thing I want to say about resumes and cover letters, and I've said it a lot throughout this presentation, is tailor it for every job. Okay, it's a lot of work, but it is worth it. And employers are able to tell. They know if you've tailored your resume for the job or not. And some of them might decide that if you didn't tailor your resume for the job, they're not going to interview you. So it's very important to do that. And to actually take the time to do it properly. So don't rush with your job applications. Make sure that you tailor your resume, write your cover letter, and then leave it for a day. Let your brain forget what you've written and then go back and proofread it. That's probably one of the most important things, important pieces of information that I can give you, is to give your brain time to forget what you wrote, so you can actually pick up on any mistakes, or maybe you want to write something differently. Give yourself time to make sure that your application is the best that it can be. Well, thank you very much for attending and watching this video today. You can reach out to us if you need more assistance with your resumes and cover letters. And I hope you found this video helpful today. Thank you very much.